Shalum. Shalom and welcome to the channel. If you're tuning in for the first time, my name is Symmanayah. I have two YouTube channels. One is called White Rose Family, which has a focus in most part with talking about and presenting things to consider for the final Exodus, things to consider to fulfill Revelation 7th chapter, which speak of the set-apart children of Yahusha wearing white robes in the ending days. Though I believe it's primarily talking about spiritual white robes, I believe it's the possibility that we will be wearing white robes literally as well. But that channel, White Rose Family, is focused on those who believe there will be a final Exodus before the physical return of Yahusha. This channel, Symmanayah, is focused on attributes to contribute towards the growth and maturity and set-apartness, to make sense and to be able to navigate through the many different interpretations, practices, teachings, to come to a sense of wholeness, or at the very least, knowing that our feet, are on the right path towards unity in a set-apart nation. In this segment of the series, Letter and Spirit, a series that focuses on encouraging us to learn how to pursue, to discern the voice of the Almighty Yahuah, who is Spirit everywhere at all times, who made it possible for us to speak to him through his word, sent in Yahusha's name, drawn by Yahuah to his word, as John 6:44 states. So in this particular segment of Letter and Spirit, I want to talk about the Promised Land, my brothers and sisters. It will not be a lot of focus on all the details, so it has some similar attributes to where it could be placed on White Rose Family Channel. But this particular message, my brothers and sisters, come and listen, for I believe it is important as we pursue maturity, because there will be times of displacement, of movement. This message is for those who believe there will be a final Exodus. It is also for those who want to be clear on Yahusha's final destination before Yahusha's physical return. I do not profess to have all the answers, but I do want to say this. There are 4 different positions that I am aware of regarding the Promised Land. There are those who believe the Promised Land encompasses much of the Middle East, as I do. There are those who will point to Sub-Saharan Africa, some that points to Southeastern Africa, and some even believe America or the United States is the Promised Land. Let's take a look at what was given to Abraham, what was promised to Abraham. Come with me to Genesis 15th chapter, verses 13 through 15. It reads, and I'm reading from the eSword, version 11. It reads, "And he said to Abram, know for certain that your seed are to sojourn in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But the nations whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterwards let them come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you are to go to your fathers in peace. You are to be buried at a good old age." And it continues, 16 through 18. I'm in the 15th chapter of Genesis. "Then in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the crookedness of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to be when the sun went down and it was dark, that see a smoking oven and a burning torch passing between those pieces. On the same day Yahuah made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given you this land to your seed, and from the river Mitzrayim to the great river Euphrates. Now, Mizraim, in some translation, will say the great river of Egypt or the river of Egypt. But here we see it spells out that Yahuwah gave the promised land and made a promise to Abram. It goes on to say, with the Canaanites and the Kenizzites and the Kadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaim and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girgashite and the Yabushites. Let me continue. My brothers and sisters, clearly the Almighty Father spoke of the borders of the promised land. Be advised, I am fully aware that many interpretations of scriptures, that there are many interpretations of the scriptures. I'm also aware that man has tampered with maps. There's also the big debate on whether the earth is flat or a sphere. The debate of the shape is for another broadcast, another presentation. I wanted to set the stage for what I believe supports the position of the Promised Land, encompassing much of the Middle East. In addition to what the scriptures describe, let me present a practical premise that supports the Middle East position that could be weighed by the spirit of set-apartness. You see, there are many teachings and practices that infect set-apart Yahusha coming from different groups. Consider what I present in the next slides, my brothers and sisters, and I will share its relevance to the Promised Land. You see, Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 reads as follows. I'm going to read Revelation 2:9 again from the eSword version 11. I know your works in pressure and poverty, yet you are rich in the blasphemy of those who say they are Yehudim and are not, but are the congregation of Satan. If you go to Revelation 3:9, it says, see, I am giving up those of the congregation of Satan who say they are Yehudim and are not, but lie. See, I am making them come and worship before your feet and to know that I have loved you. I wanted to bring this up, my brothers and sisters, to let you know when it comes to the Promised Land, the synagogue of Satan has flipped the script on a lot of things. They have changed and perverted a lot of things. They control, to some degree, much of the print and media that's out that influence our thought. Did you know before the Arabian plate, tectonic plate, was named, that it encompassed part of Africa, the African tectonic plate? In other words, much of the Middle East was part of Northeast Africa. I'm aware that Africa is not the original name of the landmass, but it is a point that needs to be brought out. It is important to be able to identify how those of the synagogue of Satan demonstrate the opposite on what is true. They have hidden and twisted many things regarding our history, Yahusha, so be mindful of that. It is very important for us to seek to discern what the Spirit of Yahuwah is saying to us. If you consider changes to our history, the question can be asked, why hide the Middle East from African maps? Have you noticed that most maps, jewelry, images, paintings, and other like representations of Africa have cut off what is now known as the Middle East? Is it possible the synagogue of Satan and all their influence has made a strong effort to hide the Promised Land? Who has given thought to this possibility, this reality? Have you ever considered what methods the Almighty Yahuah used to scatter Yahusha for our disobedience? You might say, what? Bear with me. Are you aware that throughout the scriptures, famine, pestilence have been a tool for revealing the fruit of rebellion? Keep in mind, famine, pestilence usually are a result of extreme drought, in some cases desert-like conditions. You might say, well, why are you bringing this up? Let me also mention the condition how it is written regarding healing the land. And I'm going to come back to that desert thing in a minute, my brothers and sisters. Stay with me. Take a look at one of the most misunderstood passages. Here people think it is anywhere we are located. I'm compelled to believe the words heal their land references the land Abba Yahuah promised only. Let's go to what I am referencing, my brothers and sisters. You see, one of the things that occur with our struggle in different positions of belief is that our comprehension levels will vary. That's why it is important to always lean on the Spirit of the Almighty Father, who sent his word in Yahusha's name to teach us and guide us, as mentioned in John 14:26, my brothers and sisters. But this is what I'm talking about specifically. In 2 Chronicles, 7th chapter, verse 13 and 14, again, the eSword, version 11, it reads, "If I shut up the heavens and there is no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, and my people upon whom my name is called, and if I send whom my name is called shall humble themselves," it say, if I shut up the heavens, that there's no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, and my people upon whom my name is called shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, then I shall hear from the heavens and forgive their sin and heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7, 13 and 14. You see, my brothers and sisters, there are those who choose another area for the promised land because much believe the Middle East is a desert. They do not believe we will be gathered to what is a desert, what is now a desert. They prefer to choose areas that are flourishing now and has been for years. They ignore that there were methods used to scatter Yasharal. Additionally, they disregard the power of Abba Yahuah to change the conditions of a landscape. In other words, my brothers and sisters, some people are pushing support to their premise that it's going to be South-Saharan Africa or East Africa because it's flourishing with milk and honey, animals and vegetation. We must never forget the power of Abba Yahuah. And when I was talking about the Middle East being mostly a desert, consider this. When Yahuah scattered us, can you imagine a stiff-necked people and Yahuah saying, "Get out of here, get away, I'm scattering you"? What do you think a stiff-necked people would do? I ain't moving. I don't want to go. I like it here. So what have we seen demonstrated as a method of moving and displacing or humbling Yasharal? Famine, pestilence, and disease. These follow on the heels of drought, lack of water, desert-like conditions. I submit to you that the area that is commonly known as the Middle East, that's mostly a desert, was not always like that. And I believe that the promised land will flourish. Water will spur up. We're even beginning to see some foreshadows of how water, moisture, can go to the desert. How it can begin to contribute towards producing foliage in preparation for Yasharal's return. We must never forget the power of Abba Yahuah, my brothers and sisters. Let us visit Ezekiel 36 chapter, verses 6 through 8. Ezekiel 36, 6 through 8 reads, "Therefore prophesy concerning the land of Yasharal, and you shall say to the mountains and to the hills, to rivers, to valleys, thus saith the Master Yahuah, see, I have spoken in my jealousy and my wrath, because you have borne the shame of the nations. Therefore thus saith the Master Yahuah, I have lifted my hand in an oath that the nations that are around you shall bear their own shame. But you, O mountains of Yasharal, put forth your branches, bear your fruit to my people Yasharal, for they are about to come. Does that sound like he's changing the landscape in preparation for that final exodus, for that final gathering? There's more. He goes on to say, verse 9 through 11. Again, I'm in eSword, version 11. For look, I am for you, and I shall turn to you, and you shall be tilled and sown. And I shall increase men upon you in all the house of Yasharal, all of it. And the cities shall be inhabited, and the ruins rebuilt. And I shall increase upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bear young. And I shall make you inhabited as of old, and do better for you than at your beginning. And you shall know that I am Yahuah. Does it sound like he's fixing some things? There's more to review, O Yasharal. Think about it. It was Yahuah that made much of the Middle East desert. These were some of the methods that scattered Yasharal. But he talks about a return, a replenishing, an increase. But there are those who rather say South Saharan Africa or East Africa. One of the premises they use is that the Middle East is a desert. Not to mention some talk about size. We'll get into that in a minute. It goes on to say in the 33rd verse and 34th verse, same chapter, 36 of Ezekiel. Thus said the Master Yahuah, on the day that I cleanse you from all your crookedness, I shall cause the cities to be inhabited, and the ruined places shall be rebuilt, and the land that was laid waste, tilled instead of being a ruin before the eyes of all who pass by. It continues. Verse 35 and 36. I'm still in Ezekiel, 36th chapter. And they shall say, this land that was laid waste has become like the Garden of Eden. And the wasted, the deserted, and the destroyed cities are now walled and inhabited. Then the nations which are left all around you shall know that I, Yahuah, have rebuilt the destroyed places and planted what was laid waste. I, Yahuah, have spoken it and shall do it. Have South Saharan Africa been laid waste? Have East Africa been laid waste for many years and then restored? Does it fit the description of an area where Yasharal was chased out of and now they've returned? Has the final exodus come to be? No, my brothers and sisters. By now, O Yasharal, I pray that you are able to receive how Abba Yahuah works with lands. So using the excuse my brothers and sisters, hold on, I got my slides out of order. Okay. By now, I pray that you are able to receive how Abba Yahuah works with land. By using the excuse of the Middle East is a desert and it's too small, is unacceptable when the scriptures clearly tell us that something transpired. And if we look throughout much of the so-called Old Testament, we will see famine and pestilence and disease, drought, was one of the tools used to present the fruit of Yasharal's rebellion, to cause Yasharal to be scattered. You see, sometimes we forget that these were men, women, and children just as we are today. And in the stubbornness it requires sometimes something phenomenal to occur to make us move. Let it be known, my brothers and sisters, some take the position that the area between the boundaries of the Euphrates and the Nile is too small to accommodate the set-apart ones returning. Some focus on that little sliver of land that they call Israel today. That's not the borders described in the scriptures, my brothers and sisters. This is contributing to the factor why some tend to believe the promised land is somewhere else, such as Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Africa. They use the rationale that it's bigger, that it's big enough to house those that will be gathered. I invite you to research the true size of Africa, my brothers and sisters. And if you research images, you'll notice that the images tend to show it without consideration to the Middle East, which was part of Northeast Africa. If one was to attach the Middle East to the true size of Africa, it would be much larger than people are programmed to believe. My point is that the borders of the Promised Land are larger than what many think, much larger than that sliver of land they call Israel, and much larger than most of these maps that we have been conditioned to believe. You see, my brothers and sisters, much of the world have been programmed to believe the state of Israel is the Promised Land. There is much hype, teachings, and programming to think of the state of Israel as the Promised Land alone. We do not see much teachings on the true borders of the Promised Land mentioned in scriptures. Why? Because the world knows that the borders of the true Promised Land spans multiple countries, and we are not native to that land. It was a land that Yahuah gave us and has promised to us. So much of the world do not want to acknowledge what is truly promised to us. Yahusha. Beware, there are those with redrawing maps to push their belief regarding the location of the Promised Land. What do I mean? They change the names of locations. They're ignoring the fact that some locations in throughout Africa was named similar to the original locations. Some rivers were renamed. In some cases, they're even flipping the map to try to justify Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Africa. Beware, Yahusha. The Promised Land is a destination that will be reached by those gathered for the final Exodus. And I know I spoke of the channel White Rose Family talks about the final Exodus. But what is important in pursuing maturity is knowing that there will be movement in our growth and in our maturity. Therefore, I am compelled to present this message on this channel. A brief digression. It is important to realize when Yahusha was displaced, they named other land areas using the same similar names as I mentioned earlier. In other words, some land areas have the same name as their original locations. But there are some differences. There are some facts and evidence that have arisen in these recent days. Oh, listen to these words. It is my position that the true mountain where Moses received the Ten Commandments is now known as Jabal al-Lawz. This location is located in the northwest quadrant of what is now known as the Middle East. I invite you to research recent discoveries that present the case that this is the true mountain of the Almighty Yahuah. This mountain is within the borders of the Promised Land mentioned in the scriptures. I want to present some scriptures that are important regarding where we should not go to fulfill the final Exodus. Let me first go over some key things to consider that I believe are important, but I'm going to present why we should not go to Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Africa or anywhere outside the Promised Land that is described in the scriptures. But I want to say this before I show those scriptures. It is important to know how to discern the voice of the Almighty Yahuah as he sent his word in spirit in Yahusha's name, as it is written. So many of us, because we do not understand the dynamics of that relationship, that he, Yahuah, when we speak of his name, is speaking of he that is the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, spirit everywhere at all times. We fail to grasp and understand that when he manifests his word, it is he who chose to use the name Yahusha. So when we hear Yahusha, it identifies the process, the details in which we have everlasting life by he that is the Almighty One. And when we look at John 14:26, we see upon the resurrection, Yahuah sent his spirit in Yahusha's name. There's a continuity when we look at Yahusha, when we look at the virgin birth, him walking among us, his spirit sent in Yahusha's name. Yahusha means Yahuah saved, or some will say Yahuah salvation. We will learn this importance, my brothers and sisters. There is no Trinity. We will learn that the Ruach HaKodesh is the spirit of Yahuah, is the spirit of Yahuah sent in Yahusha's name. And why it's important to embrace in Yahusha's name. For no man can come unto the Father except by the Son being his word manifest before us, physically and in spirit. Remember this, my brothers and sisters, and I haven't forgotten about the subject, the promised land. There's some things that I want to bring to your attention. John 14:25 and 26 say, these words I have spoken to you while still with you, because the helper, the set-apart spirit whom the Father shall send in my name, this is Yahusha being quoted, he shall teach you all and remind you of all that I said to you. He, the spirit of Yahuah that comes in Yahusha's name. Let the words of the next slide be top of mind when discerning the different experiences Yahusha had during their many journeys, my brothers and sisters. It is important to be mindful of Malachi 3:6. It said, for I am Yahuah, shall not change, and you, O sons of Yaakov, shall not come to an end. That's spoken of in Malachi 3:6. It's reaffirmed in James 1:17. It says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change nor shadow of turning. I wanted to bring this up, my brothers and sisters, because it's important that we be mindful of that. I want to also present something related to the gifts from Abba Yahuah. I submit that it is related to Abba Yahuah's gifting the land to Yahusha. It is my position that the promised land is a gift from Abba Yahuah. I believe it's a gift that did not nor does change. The promised land is the same yesterday, today, and will be in the days ahead. Consider Romans 11:29. It says, for the gifts and calling of the Almighty One are not to be repented of. He doesn't give it to us and take it away. My sword, version 11, uses Elohim. That's plural for mighty ones. I am compelled to say there's only one Almighty One, that is Yahuah, whose word, his word, no Trinity, comes to us in the name of Yahusha. As I continue, let us seek to discern and understand why we are not to go anywhere else other than the promised land. Let me repeat myself. Let us seek to discern and understand why we are not to go anywhere else other than the promised land. Consider Genesis 26 chapter, verses 1 through 3. Genesis 26, 1 through 3 reads as follows, my brothers and sisters. And there was a scarcity of food in the land. That's talking about famine. Besides the first scarcity of food, which was in the days of Abraham, that's letting you know this is another famine that came. And Yitzhak went to Abimelech, sovereign of the Philistines, in Gerar. And Yahuah appeared to him and said, listen carefully, my brothers and sisters. Do not go down to Mitzrayim. Live in the land which I command you. sojourn in this land, and I shall be with you and bless you, for I will give all these lands to you and your seed, and I shall establish the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. Some translations say Egypt. Egypt, Mitzrayim, defines a land of bondage. And I present to you, my brothers and sisters, anywhere outside the land that the Almighty Father has promised us is a land of bondage. And we will discover as the world government takes shape, as the one world leader, the anti-Mashiach and false prophet rise up, as the restrainer is removed, that all the lands outside of the promised land would be a land of bondage. Much land will have been destroyed, for over 2/3 of the world's population will face destruction and death. And I believe that much of the planet will be uninhabited, forcing migration towards the area, the region in Northeast Africa where life began. If we do our research, we can discover that Mitzrayim, Egypt, represents the land of bondage. It is my position that anywhere outside the promised land is a land of bondage. So if you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Africa, North Africa, anywhere outside the borders that I mentioned of earlier, even if you stay in the United States, you are rebelling against the desires of the Almighty Father. Did we really think 2/3 of the planet would be destroyed and that wouldn't move populations, my brothers? Let me give you another passage of scripture of why we should not go anywhere outside the promised land. Soon the world will acknowledge who we are. Soon the borders of the true promised land will be established, and we will return before the physical return of Yahusha. But come with me to Jeremiah 44th chapter. You see, people are quick to say and name different areas, but they ignore these verses where Yahuwah is clearly saying stay out. He said it in Genesis, and now he's saying it again through Jeremiah. 44th chapter, verse 12 reads, "And I shall take the remnant of Yehudah who have set their faces to go into the land of Mitzrayim to sojourn there. And they shall all be consumed in the land of Mitzrayim, fall by the sword, consumed by scarcity of food. From the least to the greatest, they shall die by the sword, by scarcity of food, and they shall be an oath and an astonishment and a curse and a reproach." It goes on to say, verse 13 and 14. I'm in the 44th chapter of Jeremiah. "And I shall punish those dwelling in the land of Mitzrayim, as I have punished Jerusalem, by the sword, by scarcity of food, by pestilence. And none of the remnant of Yehudah who have gone into the land of Mitzrayim to sojourn there shall escape or survive, lest they return to the land of Yehudah, to which they are longing to return to dwell there. For they shall not return except those who escape." My brothers and sisters, I've showed you 2 instances where the Almighty Father said, do not go into the land of Mitzrayim. Some people that talk about the final exodus or the promised land think they're playing it safe by just saying going back to the continent. No, my brothers and sisters. We cannot, I say we cannot. It's done. We should not embrace the narrative of saying go back to the continent. For that's like straddling the fence. That's like being lukewarm. Where on a continent? And I say it is the northeast part. It is the promised land as described in the scriptures. Please note, my brothers and sisters, I'm compelled to believe anywhere other than where Yahuwah, the Almighty Yahuwah, has given us is a place of bondage. It's Mitzrayim. Please be advised, O Yasharal. The conditions outside the promised land will face much destruction through famine, pestilence, disease, war-torn conditions, earthquakes, even meteor showers. Given that the Almighty Yahuah does not change, it would be wise to avoid considering any other place other than what is written in the scriptures. Beware, my brothers and sisters, and embrace our true destination regarding the promised land. Some of us, our spirit is stirred, and we would believe we will be among the ranks to return to the promised land. The challenge would be, what ship do we get on? Which directions do we support? The choice is yours, O Yahusha. But know that the spirit, power, and might of the Almighty Father Yahuah will stir within us, will bring discipline and refinement, and direct our footsteps in the right direction to the right destination. We will return to the promised land, and it may happen sooner than you realize. But I will say this, O Yahusha, look at the conditions on the planet. Look at the migration patterns. And I did a series on White Rose Family channel called The Closing Scroll. I invite you sincerely to listen to it, my brothers and sisters. And look at the people crossing borders. Look at the directions that they are going. Look at the areas where wars and civil unrest is magnifying. What do you think will happen if civil war broke out in the United States, as it is in many parts of the world? Do you think everyone will choose to be entangled with civil war? Or will there be obedient ones of Yahuah, directed towards safety and refuge, directed back to the promised land? I believe something phenomenal is going to happen. Something extraordinary will happen that will cause Yahusha to start moving closer to one another and to exit points that leads to the true promised land. Now, in some cases, we can see evidence of that now. To those who have eyes and ears can receive it happen now. But I believe it's going to be phenomenal, extraordinary, something. I expect that at the very least, the two witnesses of Revelation will echo the sentiments of returning Yahusha to the land which is promised them. And the world will acknowledge and assist with us returning to the promised land. Gird up, O Yahusha, pray earnestly to discern what must be done. There will be those among us that will support efforts to move towards the promised land and will not be passengers on the ship or vehicles that lead to it. We will face physical death. But physical death as a set apart one is sleep. Thus, when the scriptures talk about no one left behind, many of us will die. You see, the scriptures say he reigned on the just and the unjust. So he's not going to hold back the conditions of the tribulation to every set apart child is returned to the promised land. You see, he talks about many being led astray, or falling away, some on milk, some blinded for unbelief. But these, in some cases, are our brothers and sisters. They're just not matured yet, and they will face physical death. And there are some of us who will be the last encouraging words to those facing destruction. Let them know that this plan is the plan of Yahuah. So no set-apart child of Yahuah is left behind. We will be either in the bosom of Abraham or physically returned to the promised land. And I believe the two witnesses will go into Jerusalem for the last and final words to those who are in the wrong place, saying, we need to be closer to the set apart mountain and to come out of her before they face physical death. Yahusha, Yahusha, the promised land is there. It will go through a transformation like we never imagined. The children of Yahusha will be gathered. What say you, O Yahusha, to believe it and to believe in end times, but not do things that support the gathering of Yahusha, the coming together, could make us seem like hypocrites. Look around, O Yahusha. There's been many types and shadows, but now we are facing times when the clock is ticking down. Time is growing short. One scientific and natural and practical way to measure it is to look up the narrative dealing with climate change and the possibility of our extinction. Research the word COP28 and see what narratives the world have been spinning to inform us that we are reaching and could reach a point of total extinction if nothing is done. I submit to you, O Yahusha, the scriptures tell us that Yahuwah is a consuming fire. Could global warming, could the warming of the planet be moving in the direction where we come to that point where it speaks of in Peter that he saw the earth melt and consumed in fire? Could the global warming be leading to that transition when earth, as we know it, is consumed, and then we see a new heaven, a new earth, a new Jerusalem? Do you know, my brothers and sisters, that volcanic activities, when magma come up, it creates new land mass? You see, so understanding that the earth being consumed, there's a scripture that talks about the earth forever. I believe layers of the earth will be consumed with fire to make way for that new earth, that new Jerusalem. But before all this even come to be, there are other scriptures that must be fulfilled regarding the final Exodus, the promised land. Pray on these matters, Yahusha, for as we move into maturity, let's realize that we must prepare ourselves and for some begin to move. Let's talk about that movement. Literally movement. With whom, when, where, how? Yahusha, oh Yahusha, a destination waits us. What's stirring within you? Let us have these discussions. Let us be frank. Let us be sincere. Let us pursue truth. On that note, my brother, my sister, my family, I salute your pursuit of set apartness, your desire to grow in maturity. I thank you for taking the time and the patience to listen to this message. May the Spirit of the Almighty Father Yahuwah, who sent his word in Yahusha's name, make known and clear all that we are expected to do. Let us discern, understand, and obey. On that note, I say to you, my brother, my family, my sisters, Shalum. Shalom to you.